I do want to welcome you all today. My name is Dave Dallas. I am a teacher here in the College of Education. I teach social studies and social studies methods. And the way that this came about is this past summer, I got some information from NCSS, the National Council for Social Studies, about a workshop in Portland on teaching with primary sources. I went to Portland State for 2 days in July, met Emily there, who was also at that same workshop, found out that the Western Regional Consortium, which is based at Metro State University in Denver, offers scholarships and money to put on workshops. And so I had talked to Emily from Oregon Historical Society, Andrew, well, I guess it was Amanda from the Oregon Jewish Museum, but Amanda really picked the great way to get out of this. She had a child during that time. And then I had also talked to Alyssa from the Japanese American Museum of Oregon. Additionally, I talked with a representative from Temasclet Cultural Center. Unfortunately, in November, they had to pull out of the partnership. So basically today is being paid both from our Teach Rural Oregon grant, which is an ODE EAC equity grant that I applied for in the Grow Your Own area, and then also from the Library of Congress. So before we get started, Christine, did you find something nice that was approval? Okay, so she has something for her coffee. Okay, before we do get started, I do want to recognize, particularly since this is a social studies teaching with primary sources workshop, I do want to take time to acknowledge the original caretakers of this land. And with land acknowledgements, when I have been in these, I don't want to say they become rote, but in some ways they become rote. People, say it, and then we move on. So I guess I'd just like to take a moment, and I want you to close your eyes and just kind of visualize what you think this area, or even the area you came from, looked like prior to 1600. And just think about what it was during the time that the original inhabitants of this area were here prior to European influence and colonization. Okay, thank you for that. All right, I'm going to start off today talking about 3 different areas. The primary sources from the Library of Congress that you can utilize, from shared history, tribal history, which is Senate Bill 13, and then also our own EOU library. And are there just a couple of housekeeping things before I do get started? For some of you that may have come in late, before you leave today, we will need your W-9. And if you want direct deposit, a voided check. We just need it by the end of the day. So if you haven't filled it out, that's okay. It is in your folder. Also, all of the handouts from today's presentation are in there as well. And then you should have a link. I sent the second email with the link, and that's if you want to follow along. Okay, so for some of you, and there were some that in the survey that we sent out, the pre-survey, that said you were not familiar with primary sources. So I don't want to just jump in and make that assumption that you already know what primary sources are. So briefly, I just wanted to reference that. So a primary source is an artifact. It can be a document, it can be a diary, it can be a manuscript, autobiography, recording, or any other source of information that was created at the time under study. It serves as an original source information about the topic. Now, some people will talk also about secondary sources. So I tried to give some examples of what a primary source is and what a secondary source is. So a primary source would be the Declaration of Independence. That would be your primary source. But the secondary would be a newspaper article about the Declaration of Independence. It can still be utilized as a teaching tool, but it is not necessarily considered a primary source. Same thing if you're listening or you're studying ragtime and you're wanting to know about Scott Joplin. A recording of one of his works would be a primary source, but an analysis of ragtime music or analysis of his music would be a secondary source. And then lastly, the results of an opinion poll. That would be the primary source, but then a blog post interpreting the poll results, that interpretation would be considered a secondary source. And I just realized as I am just talking, I'm hoping that everyone can hear me. I do kind of have a teacher voice, but if you can't, let me know, and I'll try to talk louder. All right. Any questions about this before we kind of jump in? Okay? All right. First thing that we're going to do is an exercise, and this can be something that you can do yourself in your own classroom. Some of my secondary teachers and my elementary teachers that are here may have already done this with me. It's called Whose Pockets? And it was developed and then utilized using the C3 framework. If you're not familiar with that, that is the framework that was developed as a source for standards for social studies that states could then adopt. I know you guys are probably all aware of the ELA and math standards that were adopted for the Common Core standards. And what happened with those is after those were developed, because they needed those for the standard-based assessments, a lot of areas such as science, social science, PE realized, oh, we don't have a common set of standards that could be utilized by states. And so the NCSS, which is the National Council for Social Studies, came up with the C3 framework and developed their own national standards based on that. And in Oregon, our social studies standards are based on those. We do have additional ones that have been added, but they are based on those. So this was sponsored in part by the Eastern Region Program with Waynesburg University. So there are 3 different regional areas. The western area that I was talking about is at Metro State in Denver. It is still tied to the Library of Congress directly in Washington, D.C., but they serve as kind of a clearinghouse for the western region. So we're going to start off with a game. And you may have noticed I have set out materials over here. So there are 7 of these. And you're going to go in small groups. You're going to probably want to take your notebooks. And the goal of this game is to figure out whose pockets these artifacts came from. Write down things you notice and what you think they might be. So in small groups, you're going to circulate your side of the room, and it looks kind of like there's almost like a natural area there. So if someone's in front of you, just take your time, but look at it and write some things down and move on. Make sure you've done all of those 7. And then I want you to formulate something, and then once you've done that, you can come up and look at the final one, which is up here. And I always put this up here because if you see this, it kind of all comes together very quickly. So your group will rotate throughout all of the artifacts and prepare to make an argument with evidence. So as you're talking at the end, you're going to go, I think that it's this person's pockets, and I'm basing it on these things. Okay? So any questions about what you guys are going to be doing? Okay, yes?
So multiple people's pockets?
No, just one. It came from one person's pockets. Okay, any questions? All right, you're gonna have about 15 minutes.
Someone who travels on the road. Yeah.
Okay, who would like to volunteer to kind of give me an idea of what you think it is and what led you to believe that?
I think it's John Wilkes Booth because of the items that were in the pocket having to do with the Confederacy, and it looked like it was a map of where Abraham Lincoln was in the theater.
Okay. Zach?
I'll piggyback on that one. You have Abraham Lincoln, you have his Confederacy currency, you have the traveling booth, he's a traveler, you have the mouth harp, which musicians, instruments, very common in playwrights. You also have the Franklin Trophy D.C. John Wilkes Booth was in D.C. at the time. That's just, and you have your little character.
Okay.
And it's taken as what could be J. Wilkes Booth.
Okay. All right. So, one of the things that's nice about this is rather than just giving students the answers, they have to start walking around positing theories based on what they are seeing and asking questions. Okay? So, for the reveal, and this was a tough one because I was like, oh, someone's gonna get ahead. So these were in the pockets of Abraham Lincoln on the evening of his assassination. They were removed from his body when he was declared dead. And it was interesting, they went to a relative, well, they went to Mary Todd Lincoln, and then she eventually gave them to an aunt that then was like going through this box and realized what she had and donated it to the Library of Congress. So a couple of things here. This is actually a stock. If you look at it real closely, it says payable 5 years at the conclusion of the Civil War. So it was a stock that they had sold. He received that. He actually went to Richmond about 5 days before he was assassinated, and he had been given that. He actually, both of those glasses are his. One is a fold-up one that went into that little piece, and then he also had one that he had tied together, if you'll notice on that. You also have his wallet, his knife. You have a button from there. The unusual thing that you see that looks kind of like a piece of rock is actually a fob holder. So you would put it in your pocket and it would be attached to your watch. So if your watch fell out of your pocket or it didn't catch as you were putting it in, and it would fall, but it wouldn't hit the ground. That weight would keep it from hitting the ground. And then the last one, which some of you may or may not have come up and seen, was the handkerchief that said A. Lincoln on it. And that's why I left that one up here. Okay, so this is an activity through the Library of Congress. Those things are available, so you could go through and do this same exact exercise if you would like. And certainly you now have some of these, and if you need me to provide additional access on those when you get back to your school or you're having trouble finding or locating that exercise, please let me know. All right. Any questions about the exercise? Was it a little bit more interesting way to learn about maybe Lincoln's assassination than going, oh, on April, I think it was 12th, 1865, or whatever that date was, this happened? Okay, so what we are going to be doing is, and I will go through and provide you with links for this in your slides, and I find that's easier because sometimes as I'm taking people through this, you start going down the path and all of a sudden, you took that wrong turn at Albuquerque. And so that's why I have those links in. I'm going to go ahead and click on this link. So this would be, if you come up, this is the Library of Congress. And I am going to be taking you through quickly the library catalog, the digital, the digital collections, and then the teachers. Okay, and then we'll also do quickly the more on this. So if you are clicking, and I'm going to take you back here. So if you go into the library catalog, here is that link for that. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. So this will take you to this page. There are several different things here that you can look at. The ones I am going to show you today are Primo, the Prints and Photographs Online catalog, and the the Sound Online Inventory catalog. So this first one here, this is great if you are particularly trying to locate various and different things. And if you like going down rabbit holes, this is a perfect site for this. And so you can go through, Fenton Crimea War photographs, posters, the anchor posters, the Sikkim photos. There are a plethora of things that you can go down and start. And I will give you some time at the end of this. We'll take little breaks between this because I'm one of those people that gets in this and I go to these workshops and they show you all the links and then they move on and I'm like, I need just like 5 minutes to be able to go down my own personal rabbit hole. Okay? So with that in mind, let me go back here. So that was the print one. Now the sound online one is a little bit different. So they have radio broadcasts, news-only broadcasts, commercials, archival, music-only, spoken. I will tell you, when you go into those, you do need to have a sense of kind of what you're looking for. But they range from the broadcast to the crash of the Hindenburg to the last moments of Celilo Falls. And so for those of you, that are looking at stuff in Oregon, there's even some wonderful resources within that. So that is your sonic inventory. And then the last one is Primo. And this is if you're wanting to go a little bit further along, and it searches across subscription databases. The next thing I do want to mention to you is Ask a Librarian. This is one of the best features about the Library of Congress. I remember when I was in the workshop with Emily, I had a question about, I was trying to get some additional information on the Coxstock incident, which if you're not familiar with that, that was the basis for Oregon's race-based laws when they excluded African Americans from Oregon. And so I was finding very minimal things. So I did the Ask a Librarian, and within about, I think, 2 hours, it depends on the time of day, because they're in Washington, but I got more information. Now we were laughing because the information I got back was stuff I had already seen, like the Oregon Encyclopedia and all of this stuff. And so I pursued it a little bit further, and they got back even more information for me. So that is something, if you're always trying to get started and you're not really sure how to get started, that's a great way to do that. Okay? And I just realized, when I started this, and I probably should have done this in a little bit different order, but it'll all work out in the end. So digital collections. Again, they have historic buildings, chronicling history through newspapers, the Farm Security Administration. So if some of you are not familiar, during the 1930s, during the Depression, as part of the New Deal, writers, photographers, artists, musicians were put to work doing certain things. And in this case, I'm sure some of you are familiar with Dorothea Lange. she was tasked with, by the Farm Security Administration, to record what was going on in the Dust Bowl at that time. Additionally, you'll find archival information. There is one specifically that is oral histories of slaves. And if you ever watch Finding Your Roots, Pharrell Williams realized through this that they had gone back and found a written oral history that was put together on his great-great-grandmother. And it was talking about her experience as a slave on a plantation prior to the Civil War. And this was done because a lot of these people did not, either they were had not learned to read, and so all of theirs was through stories. So this is a great place to look a little bit further into that area. And then for teachers, and this is the one I was thinking, oh, I should have done this first. So getting started with primary sources. If you are not really sure how to get started with primary sources, this is a great way to go through this site. There are some videos within this, how to engage your students, how to promote student inquiry, and how to assess them on their critical thinking. Now within that are these primary classroom materials and primary source sets. So you'll notice the primary source sets was actually one that I had pulled for this activity. But they have all these various primary source sets that have been put together, and they are, I mean, you can find almost pretty much anything if you are interested. But it has these, everything has kind of been put together, so you're not having to pull things for certain projects. And then,
You just have to print those off.
yeah, and in fact, within that, and forgive me, I should have gone back here. There is, and I don't know if it's on this site. Okay, free to use and reuse sets. Those are free for you to use and reuse. Okay, and so, and again, you'll get a little bit of time to explore. And again, that's also why I gave you the links, and you have this slide deck. So you can access those if you can't get to sleep tonight, or you really want to go down a rabbit hole.
Thank you.
No, and don't hesitate to ask questions, because I realize I'm going through a lot of information fairly quickly here. Okay, then they do have lesson plans on this, so you can search through the lesson plans. Okay, and within this, and you'll notice these are all along here, and this is if you go into the teacher's site. And then last but not least are the presentations. And so they have media-rich presentations on specific things. You know, inaugurations, immigration and relocation, primary source timelines, and you know, these are ones that have already been done for you. Okay? And then within this,
PowerPoint slideshows, you know what those are?
it depends. I think the majority of them are multimedia. And so they may have some pictures and then a video and also something else. Okay? So I would encourage you to just kind of explore them, and they're constantly changing because they're updating things as they're going through. And then the last thing is professional development. They do offer professional development. Some of these are self-guided online modules, so you can do your own on those. And then they do on-site workshops, like the one I did in Portland was an on-site workshop. They do have webinars. And then you can also request a workshop or a webinar for educators. Okay? Now, services and programs. I wanted to bring this up just because it has all these various ones, particularly over here, the American Folklife Center, American Archive of Public Broadcasting. And so within those, you can get additional primary sources. Okay, you also have another thing I did want to note here is linked data service, interlibrary loan if you need to utilize that, and then cooperative programs. And then, like I said, some of these various projects that they have. Okay, and then last but not least is the TPS Teachers Network. This is something that you can sign up for. It doesn't cost anything. And it's created through Metro State in Denver. It provides professional interest groups. So you can click on rural history, or you can click on Civil War history. And what you're going to be linked into are other educators that are putting together primary sources. And some of these are very obscure, but in some, they're very wide-ranging. So if you go into the TPS Teachers Network, you'll need to sign up. And then what I will tell you to do, so you'll just go in, you'll need to sign up for that. And then there is an overview that you can look beforehand if you want to look into this. I will tell you that once you sign up, and you have to decide if this is something that you really want to do, because you start like almost daily getting an update of any time, any of the areas you have signed up for. If someone puts in new material, you get updated through an email. So it's great in one aspect, but in another aspect, you just need to be prepared that you will be maybe getting a lot of information, throughout the week on specific topics. And you may look at it and go, and all it does is it has the picture of the teacher and what they've added to their area. And so you can look at it and go, oh, that's interesting. Or you can go, not my boat. Okay? So, right now we're going to do, and I do this with my students all the time. I want to take a quick stretch and breathe, because we sit, and then our brain starts getting a little mushy. So if you could all stand up. And if you have a principal that walks in and you're like, why are you doing things like this? This is how you can get around it. We're doing social studies. So what we're going to do right here is we're going to start with California, and we are going to work our way around to the states that go around Oregon, and we'll end with Oregon. Okay? So we're going to start this way. California, Nevada, Idaho, I don't hear you guys saying it. Washington, Oregon. Okay, stretch it all the way out. Okay, we're going to reverse it, and we're going to do the capitals of those states, starting with Oregon and Salem. So Salem, Olympia, Boise, Carson City, Sacramento. Okay, we just did a little quick geography thing. Okay, at the same time, I want you to breathe. And as you're doing this, I want you to pretend as you are breathing out that your balloon is getting big. So you have your balloon, taking a deep breath. Blow it out. Take it in. Blow it out. Okay, thank you. You may sit down, and you have 5 minutes to explore that site. You can either do it this way, or you can go back to your original link that I provided for you. Also, if you need to quickly, we will have a break after the big one for this, but I did want to give you some time to explore. The next little piece, which is shared history, tribal history, and I will be up front. Originally, this was supposed to be done by the representative from Temascalette, because in my mind, it would be more authentic to have someone from that cultural institute do that. But I'll be truthful, when they pulled out in November, and these are no excuses, but trying to find someone or trying to get people to answer emails in December is very difficult. And there was a certain point where I had to either fish or cut bait. And I've been trained in this, so I'm like, okay, it's not as authentic as I would like it to be, but I can still provide you with the materials. Okay, so for those of you that may or may not be familiar with this, Shared History, Tribal History is based on SB 13, Senate Bill 13, which occurred in 2017. This was passed. It is slowly being implemented right now. But it was to create a K through 12 Native American curriculum for inclusion in Oregon public schools and to provide professional development. The law also directed ODE, the Department of Ed, to provide funds to each of the 9 federally recognized tribes to create individual place-based curriculum. Okay, and I will tell you right now, it's been interesting. They have been updating this site like very recently, because I know I do this with my undergraduates, my graduate students, and I was looking at what I had provided them and links I had provided them, and all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, they've updated this just in the last month. So these continue to be things that you can utilize. So this will take you, if you click on that original link, it will take you to the Tribal History, Shared History. Now, I will also tell you, it can sometimes, and this is not a comment, but sometimes ODE makes things a little bit more complicated than they need to be. And so you can go into social science standards and then find shared history, tribal history, and then you also can go into shared history, tribal history. So I'm just kind of putting that out because sometimes it can get really confusing and you're like, wait, I thought I was here. And then you realize, oh, that's because of this. I did also want to just note, this is a map of the tribes that were in Oregon prior to European entrance into the area. And some of these may be ones that you've never heard of, and sadly, because some of these are not recognized, or they have simply been extinct due to attrition or being combined into another tribe. Okay? So with that in mind, I'm going to take you through a couple of things here. So the first thing is, this is how this is organized. And so the tribal history, shared history is based on these 9 areas: history, identity, language, genocide, federal policy and laws, treaties with the United States, lifeways, tribal government, and sovereignty. And these are kind of, within this, have all kind of contributed to this. Okay? There is an essential understanding link here, and when you click on this, it will give you this entire essential understandings of Native Americans in Oregon. And it's something that you can download and you can have for yourself. And so it goes through those 9 essential understandings. Okay, and this was developed by a group that came together from all of the tribes. Okay, so it was kind of like giving them the voice to create the curriculum and having it more authentic. Okay, so you have that link as well. And then within that, there are areas that you can explore. The first one is lesson adaptations for comprehensive learning. And this is the lesson adaptation link. And each of those have links. And it is based on 4th, 8th, 10th standards. Okay? I realize for some of you that are teaching in the primary grades that there are still some things, particularly if you go into some of the lesson plans that have been developed by the tribes, they do go into the younger students, and they also have ones that are more specific. They also have a tribal curriculum link. So far, and this is recent, I mean, this is within the last month that these were added, or at least where you can find them. So currently, there are curriculums that have been developed by the Klamath, Siletz, Grand Ronde, and those are done by grades. The Cow Creek one, when you go into that link, is still, you have to click on the one that says that. So it looks like they are even developing that as that's coming. So if you'll notice here, this is the Klamath curriculum. So if you're in that area of Oregon, you can look at that. Siletz, you have that, Grand Ronde. And even if you aren't in adjacent to that area, there are still beneficial lessons within this that are appropriate that you can utilize for your own students if you so choose. Okay? And then there is a professional development link. This is one that can be self-paced. And so when you go through this, they have this part right here, and you go through, you kind of register, and then you go through the in-service modules yourself. So this is, if you want to get professional development through this, you can go through these. And then they are constantly updating these modules and refining them. So understand this is kind of an ongoing project. It doesn't happen overnight. And so every year I have to kind of refamiliarize myself with what's been added, as I even noted. It's changed just in the last month. And so things are being increasingly added for this. I would also encourage you to contact, and that's why I put this in here, if you're not seeing things that work for your area, say Burns Paiute, say Umatilla, say Warm Springs, just reach out to those tribal websites and see, one, they may have it within that, and you can contact them directly. And sometimes it's going to take a little bit of time. Not all the tribes have equal resources. And so some people may be doing multiple things. Kind of like some of you rural teachers in the really small schools. You're teaching multiple grades, doing multiple subjects. All right. Okay. Once again, everyone stand up real quick. This one's going to be a little different. And I feel like this is important, and even for our students in our own classes. I think it's important for them to be able to get oxygen in their system, kind of reset their brain a little bit. We need to do that as teachers, because I find that, teachers are sometimes the worst at self-care. So go ahead, take your left hand, touch your right ear, and then gently pull it towards there, and just feel all this wonderful tightness in your neck right there. And then as you're doing that, try to push your shoulder down. Okay, now gently bring your head back up and reverse it. No being on the computer still. Bzzz. Knock him. Tell him he's not able to do. Now you need to stand up. Come on, stand up. See, this is what I'm saying. Teachers are the worst at self-care. All right, and then gently with both hands, just bring it forward. Okay, and then with your hands here, breathe in, and you're going to reach up to the sky. Just breathe in. Let it out. Okay, breathe in. Let it out. Okay, again, I want to give you 5 minutes to go ahead and explore those sites. You can actually, if you need to, go back on your slide deck and explore those. We will have a major break after the end of this next one, so just be aware of that. The last one I do want to mention here is the EOU library. I think sometimes there is this feeling with universities that, oh, it's only for us. And I think teachers and students, or even if you went to Eastern, once you graduate, it's like, oh, I can't use that anymore. The alarm will sound and they'll take my computer away. And I do want to let you know that those resources are there for people such as yourself. And so I wanted to take you through some of these to make you aware of that. So, the library link, this is the EOU library link if you click on that. And there are going to be a couple of areas that I'm going to take you into. I'm going to talk about the SAGE library system, the databases, the journals, newspapers, and then within that I'm going to take you into research help because the faculty here at Eastern have developed some research specific for our teachers, but I really it's not restricted to just students, and so I do want to provide you with those areas. So first off, I do want to go into, let me go into slideshow, sorry. Okay, SAGE is a consortium of various libraries in Central and Eastern Oregon, and much like some of the other consortiums, we have a university consortium of libraries that Eastern can utilize. So if you need a book that only UW or U of O might have, you can access it. Much like that, the SAGE consortium has that. So if you are in your own community, and you can even get on the system and order books and have it kind of like an interlibrary loan, but it can be sent to the library that's closest to you if you have one of these member libraries, okay? So that is one that I want you to be aware of. And again, you will have some time to go through this. The newspaper link, I think, is really important, but particularly now as more and more newspapers are putting up paywalls. And it's very frustrating if I'm trying to utilize some of those and then they put those up. So this has been very beneficial because EOU has a certain ability to subscribe to these and then provide that. So the ones I wanted to point out that are really interesting, the historic Oregon newspapers. So those are the digitized historic newspapers. I'm sure Emily, you may be saying something about some of what you guys have as well. They do have the Observer, New York Times, the Oregonian. And then this is kind of a fascinating one here. Now this is from all over, but there's small town papers and it's an archive. But it goes from 1865 up to current edition. So in a way you could be able to find some primary sources if you're like trying to get some information on, I don't know, something that was occurring in Enterprise or an area like that at the turn of the century. I guess I should say the turn of the century prior to this one. So that one is another one I wanted you to be aware of. Then within this, EOU has its own special collections. And so there are some of these, the Fred Hill, of note, the Fred Hill World War II photograph collection, as well as his own historical photographs. They do have regional historical collections, as well as Union County oral histories. So for those of you that are teaching in Union County, that may be a good resource. And I will say that oral histories are a wonderful way to get a sense from people about how things were during their day. And my parents themselves participated in one before they both died, which gives a sense of their hometown prior to the oil and gas industry coming into northwestern New Mexico, when the town they were living in was 3,000, and my dad used to ride his horse to school because the livery stable was next to the school. And then right here, I want to take you in. There's also the digital photo archive, and these are kind of fun to go through, and there are various ones that you can look. Again, it has some of these, and that goes back to those historical photos that I had mentioned. And then last but not least, if you go on the research help link, this is the one that I wanted to mention. Now, there are also government information history, local history that's been put in on there, and then also open educational resources. So, Katie Townsend's now the person that I work with. Sally Minke and I were the ones that kind of put this originally together, and it was just a way so our students could come in and find resources that they could use. So if you'll notice, up on the top, those blue bars, you have education databases, you have citing sources, you also have your children's, library children's literature collection. The one that I really want to point out is this one here, the access to children's ebooks and more. For those of you that are trying to find resources for your students in your classroom, and maybe you have Chromebooks, but you don't have a lot of books, that may be a way to go. And then the way I would like for you to click on this, the MAT for our Masters of Arts in Teaching, she and I developed kind of this social studies education guide. And so within this, you'll notice social studies lesson plans, primary source projects, technology apps, and I'm going to click on that one, and then we also have children's literature for social studies, and then selected resources, and then OSLIS is another kind of library resource. But for technology and apps, we went through and we tried, and I will be upfront, I'm going to, over the summer, need to go through this and update it and make sure everything is still free, or at least the access is point where you can just sign up and you can utilize it. But these allow you to see the various apps, so that we did it by content libraries, by maps, by primary sources, by timelines, and then also the miscellaneous. And so these would be ones that you could go in and utilize in your own teaching. Okay? So, with that in mind.
You have a question?
I have a question.
Sure.
So when I've used the e-library before, unless we're going through a special link that you create, when I'm looking for articles and my students are looking for articles, it automatically blocks you.
Oh, does it?
For amount of user ID and password.
Oh, okay.
Is there one of those you can hand out?
So, it may be that I need to work with them. It used to not be that case, and I don't know if there have been some updates. We do have a new library dean, so I don't know if that was a new policy that was implemented on that. Can someone do me a favor and see from maybe your own, like pull up your regular account and go from a non-EOU and see if that works? Because if it is blocked, then I'm going to need to go in and figure out a way or talk to the dean and say, can teachers sign up for their students to be able to access some of these apps? So thank you for bringing that to my attention, because it didn't used to be that way. Okay, and the last thing I did want to bring in, it's just an interesting one that I came across, and it's an open ed resource, and it is Exploring the Great Bear Sea. It is a curriculum resource that was actually developed in British Columbia, but it does have cross-curricular units for grades 4 through 7 and a secondary unit for social studies. Okay, any questions before we take a break? And we're going to take a break at 10:25, so we do have a little bit of time for questions. Is it feeling a little bit like you're drinking from a fire hose right now? I mean, I always try to avoid that, but with this, sometimes there's just no way. So, yeah, well, okay, that's good. As opposed to a bad fire hose, yeah, okay. As opposed to something coming out of the fire hose that you really don't want to have in your face. Okay, any questions? All right, so you have 5 minutes to just kind of explore, and then we will take a break at, am I on schedule, guys? Okay, and then our official break is from 1025 to 1035.